Welcome. I'm Scott Schlesinger, retired member of the United States Air Force and also a member of Young Israel Shomrei Amuna. Shomrei has asked me to put together a program for the community about Jews in the military. That was a tough act to put together. So we have about 40 members of the Jewish community here, from members of the Jewish community here, who are members of the United States military. End it. Let me see. Welcome. I'm Senior Master Sergeant Scott Schlesinger, United States Air Force, retired, and I was asked by Young Israel Shomrei Amuna if I would put together a program about Jews in the military. Fortunately, there are about 40 from Jews in this community who are all members of the United States military or veterans or retired. So it was a little difficult for me to put together a program and try to hit all the stops. But what I did do was I found 5 members who are active duty from different branches of the service and thought that should give you their perspective on military life and in as Jews in the military. So let's start out. First off, today is Memorial Day. And because it's Memorial Day, I think it's important to recognize that this is not a day for veterans. This is a day to commemorate people who have served our country and died in that service. So we should recognize that they have made the ultimate sacrifice. And we set aside this day not for barbecues and not for family reunions, but a time to reflect on those people who have made the ultimate sacrifice. Being in the military, there are many sacrifices for the family as well as for the individual themselves. When you think about it, military members can be picked up and moved to just about anywhere at any time, and it's a requirement. What that also means is that their spouses have to pick up and move with them in a lot of cases, or their spouses have to do without them being around in the area because they're going to a remote site. Children have to leave school, high school, junior high. All of a sudden they have to make new friends and go to a new community that doesn't necessarily have a Jewish background or support system for them to live in. So there are a lot of sacrifices made by Jewish families and as well as the Jewish member themselves. People don't. It's an all volunteer military right now, so people don't join because they have to. They join for various reasons. Paramount is they join because they have a desire to provide a service to the society. Patriotism, plain and simple. Oh, sure, they might want to get better education benefits. They might want to travel. They might want to gain experience in their chosen endeavor. Guaranteed, they're not here for the pay. There are sacrifices to be made, but certainly the military member and their family make those sacrifices for the common good of all of us. Maybe you know some of the different people here in the community. There are about 4 or 5 different women who have served in the military, my wife being one of them. There are some that have passed away recently. You might have known Cliff Price, his father in law, Stanley Billauer. I think Stanley Billauer was a member in the Korean War. Also, there was Lewis Cooper, Ruth Stokes. All of these members passed away recently or within the last few years, and they were active members in the military at one time. So, people come into the military for a lot of different reasons, but we are a microcosm of society. I know when people see the blue uniform and they ask me what branch of the service I'm in, and I tell them I'm in the Air Force, they say, "Oh, you must be a pilot." And that's kind of a misnomer. In the military, we have need for all sorts of different jobs because we don't expect to be fighting a war here in the home country. We hope to take that war or that conflict to them in their homeland. So that means that we're going to need truck drivers and mechanics and plumbers and carpenters and lawyers and accountants, judges, chaplains. We're going to need just about any job that you would find here in America right out there in the war zone. So the people you're going to be talking to today are going to give you their experiences from their perspective in their job. First thing to know is that there is a difference between active duty and National Guard. The active duty has the commander in chief is the president of the United States, but the Air Guard and the National Guard, their commander in chief is the governor of the state. The governor pays for the Guard. The Guard is a military branch that belongs to the state. It can be mobilized, and in fact, it has been mobilized for both Afghanistan and Iraq. But these are people who have joined the military and served the state unless otherwise mobilized. In the military, we have a rank system, and it's two different tiers, actually three, but we're going to talk about two of them specifically. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the chart so we can discuss it. Let me share my screen here. And here is the screen that I want. All right, so here is the U.S. military rank according to the U.S. Department of Defense. And you can see that there's only 5 branches here. They don't have the Space Force yet. Space Force is going to be pretty similar to the Air Force when you take a look at their rank. So you've got enlisted and you have officer. Enlisted members are high school or must possess at least a high school diploma. And they are going to be your, for lack of a better way of approaching it, they're your blue collar workers. Those are the people who are actually doing the work. They are the clerks, they're the soldiers, they're the mechanics, the plumbers, the people who are actually doing the work. Blue collar. They start out as an E1, and it could be a private, airman, or a seaman. They're going to be an E2. Again, you're getting a stripe now with your rank, and it goes all the way up to E9. E9 being a chief master sergeant in the Air Force, a master chief in the Navy, a master gunny in the Marine Corps, or a command sergeant major in the Army. Those are the highest in the enlisted ranks. So these people here are middle managers supervising the people who are below them. And then you've got warrant officers. Now, warrant officers, they don't have them in the Air Force any longer. I think they stopped having warrant officers back in the 70s. The other branches still have them. They have them for unique duty titles, unique duty assignments. For instance, helicopter pilots, I believe, are warrant officers in the Army. So, but there's only 4 of them, and usually these are ranks where people at the top level of the enlisted ranks might get promoted into. Then there's the officer ranks. The officer ranks start out at 01 all the way to 0, what is it here? 09 or 010, 4-star general. We'll talk about general of the Army and Air Force in just a moment. Starts out with the lieutenant rank. Lieutenant, you might see them as butter bars. And then there's first lieutenant. So it's second lieutenant, first lieutenant, captain with 2 bars. Major is a gold oak leaf. Lieutenant colonel is a silver oak leaf. You've got a colonel, which is an eagle. They call them the full bird colonel. And then you've got general, 1 star, 2 stars, 3 and 4 stars. They're brigadier general, major general, lieutenant general, and general. They had a little mnemonic that we learned in basic training: be my little general. Brigadier, major, lieutenant, and then general. And then there's the general of the Army or Air Force or whatever, and they've got a nice little constellation on their shoulders. But that's only during a period of war. Unfortunately, we haven't seen that since World War II. So you don't see any 5-star generals. However, as we went through the rank, you might have noticed that the Navy is a little bit different, as well as the Coast Guard. They don't start out as second lieutenant. They start out as an 01, as an ensign, or next as a lieutenant junior grade, or as a lieutenant. which is an O3, which is a little confusing because when they say lieutenant on the phone, you think you're probably talking to either an O1 or an O2, but you're actually talking to an O3, right? So that's their rank. There's also lieutenant commander, which is a major equivalent, and a commander, which is a lieutenant colonel also. Also, you've got captain, and that's a little confusing. When a Navy captain calls on the phone and says, "This is Captain so and so," you might think you're talking to an O3, when in fact you're talking to an O6. A captain can be confusing here. So, and then they've got admiral, which I always, no offense, Navy guys, but rear admiral lower half, really? Rear admiral upper half? Okay, that's pretty bad. But vice admiral and admiral, that works for me. All right. So those are the different rank structures that are in the military. So let's go on from here. Experiences in the military, but in my mind's eye, being in the military is a lot like being Jewish. You know, we don't have halakhas, we have regulations. And these regulations stipulate how we're going to be doing just about everything. In fact, it gets down to, if I want to wear a yarmulke in the military, it has to be 6 inches black. It has to be worn in a particular manner. No clips, can't have any writing on it. It specifies everything to a degree that we used to have a regulation, dress and appearance regulation in the Air Force, that told me that I was supposed to wear my pants so that there would be a break in the crease at the bottom of the pants, and it had to be 7/8 of an inch longer in the back than in the front. 7/8 of an inch. I used to love that because you'd pull out your rule. It couldn't be half an inch or 3/4 of an inch, but it's just like halakha. And if it isn't 7/8 of an inch, okay, then you're out of uniform. Where do you put your epaulets? Where do you put your stripes? All of that is prescribed. By the way, did you know that the place of honor in Judaism is to your right? If you're walking with somebody who's senior, you're walking with the rabbi or a Talmud Chacham, that's to the right. That's the person to the right. That's also from the military. Everything in the military is to the right. People of honor, the higher rank, are to the right. So there are a lot of customs and courtesies that go hand in hand with the military. Not everything, but I think that people in the military understand Jewish halakha and understand how we follow halakha a little bit, maybe better than some of our civilian contemporaries. So without further ado, I would like to call on one of our panel members to tell us a little bit about what he does in the military and tell us a little bit about his experiences. I've been looking forward to this because I was in the military 25 years ago, but things have changed a lot. And I can see it right here from the Zoom. So I am going to ask our Lieutenant Commander, Kinsbrunner, if he would tell us a little bit about what he's done and some of his experience. Commander Kinsbrunner was a graduate of the Naval Academy in Annapolis. And so I think he has a lot of interesting anecdotes that he can share with us. So, Commander?
Hey, thank you, Scott. Morning. So Eric Kinsbrunner. So a little bit about what I do in the Navy. I've been about 16 years now, almost to the day. Graduated 2005, May 27th. So I started off after finishing the Naval Academy, went down to Pensacola for flight training. Went Pensacola, San Antonio, to Jacksonville. Got to fly, be on P3, which is the anti-submarine warfare aircraft. Pretty much it has been retired and replaced by the P8, which is a 737. And then went out, after doing that for a couple of years, deployed across the world, went to Japan, Africa, Italy, South America, or Central America, sorry, the Philippines. Deployed twice, about 6.5 months each time. And then came back, switched over to what's called Aerospace Engineering Duty Officer. Part of that was actually on the theme today was it would be easier to deal with Jewish, like Shabbos and stuff like that, because that's more of a 9 to 5, Monday to Friday type job instead of worrying about training on Shabbos, things like that, if that ever occurred or on deployment. Then I went to Monterey, California. So I moved again, went to graduate school, and then came out here to Maryland And then purposely kind of try to stay in the local area, even though I've bounced around between Chantilly, Virginia, and then down to Pax River, which is in St. Mary's County. About quite a commute there, which I won't talk about it today, but I did have the long commute makes it also challenging for coming home on Friday, as all of you are aware who work in a regular business. So as kind of Scott mentioned, you know, and you'll probably hear a common theme today. Our experiences and mine are not quite, or not that much different than a lot of people, especially if I tell you the stories, what happened to the Naval Academy. People experience all types of things and let's say challenges or different aspects of it, of how do they keep Shabbos, like coming home, or even what do they eat? How do they make sure people don't take their food? So it's similar. Some of the difference, and you'll probably see that in at least some of the comments I make, is that there's a certain sense of authority that people are given over you, and you're being put in a position where you have to listen to them, where you can't just, and probably, and even more so than a regular business setting, because you signed up and you've kind of committed yourself, and you're not just going to turn around and quit even if it got too hard. So I started off at the Naval Academy in 2001. So I went to what's called plebe summer, which is it's kind of a boot camp, but since we're officers, it's not as rigorous as boot camp. We still did wake up at 5:30 or I don't know what time, early in the morning before it was sunny out, with a metal rod from the shower, or from like blinds that they would throw around the hallway. So you got to go do your physical workout there. So one of the things that they do is, obviously in the military, they take care of all your food for you. So we had meals every day. Ate a lot of cereal. Cereal is kosher, so that wasn't a problem. When I first got there, though, I found out, I think the first day when I checked in, which was actually before plebe summer, since I was on my own, I was able to get tuna in the cafe that they had down there. And then shortly after, I found out I can get some kosher food, which, because they actually have in the Navy system. So it was airline food. I think at the time the brand was called Wilton's. So it was like microwave dinner, double wrapped, which occasionally I had to reject because they were doing me a service by opening up the plastic before they heated it up in the microwave. So because they were like, oh, this makes it better. I told them, not really. So, but when I first started, I think probably 6 days in a row, or 6 meals in a row, because it would be lunch and dinner, I got this roast beef, or some in gravy and potato kugel. So, and I'm not a fan of potato kugel, not really that big of a fan of potatoes other than French fries. And the roast beef, I'm sure you've all had airline food before, was not my favorite. So I stopped eating that and went back to like cereal and tuna. And so we had got the opportunity to call home, which you got maybe once a week after the first week, which was on Friday night or Shabbos. So I luckily there's a Jewish chaplain there who snuck me into his office on Sunday, so I could actually make the phone call to my parents, because I wouldn't have been able to call them if not. So I gave them a call, told them that, like, you know, that's how it's going, and I told them about what I was eating, whatever, and my dad decided at the time that it would be a good idea to go call the major who was in charge of us, to tell him that I wasn't getting any food. And so I thought that would have been a bad thing, but here's this major in the Marines, and Marines are pretty tough. Like, so a major in the Marine Corps, you know, you don't want to cross his path. The only thing worse than him is like a gunny sergeant in the Marines, because they'll chew you up, spit you out. So he finds out, he comes, talks to me, he's like, what are you eating? And I said, I don't know. So I told him about it. I was like, I'm eating tuna now. He goes down. He's like, I'm going to find out. He goes down to the cafeteria and he tries it himself. He comes back and he said, well, that was terrible, but I found out there's like 6 more meals. They've just been giving you the same one all the time. So he fixed that. And so the rest of the summer, then I got like spaghetti and meatballs and like, I don't know, meatloaf, some boiled chicken. I ate a lot of tuna. Let's just say that. I still did. And then as I got older, more senior, obviously, not in the first year, but I was able to go out, like bring my own food in or something, or at least go out on the weekend. So food was, so that it's a common thing. Like, food's there. The military accommodates. It's just sometimes you don't get the best accommodation just because the situation, but it's not because they were trying to make me lose my appetite for food. I kind of joke whenever my wife asks me what I want to eat. till this day, I still say, I kind of got to the point where I just eat to eat, not because it tastes good. So I don't know, cook whatever you want. So now another story over the summer that was kind of challenging, not over the summer per se, but actually, one more over the summer. So Tisha B'Av happens over the summer, as you all know. So the first part wasn't so hard. So we got leather shoes at the time because it was already halfway through the summer, and so we earned the right to wear leather shoes. But the chaplain arranged that we didn't have to because obviously it was leather. So we wore these plastic shoes. They were all shiny, which are good if you don't want to ever shine your shoes and you can wear them, get away with them. But so they used to do this activity when we got in trouble. They decided that they would make people put water in their mouth and like hold it with your cheeks, and then you'd stand across from someone, and whoever laughed first, the other person would get splattered water all over them. But it was Tisha B'Av, so I had to explain to them when they wanted to do this that I wasn't going to do it because I was fasting for them. So they decided, they're like, okay, fine, but they still made me stand across from someone who had a thing of water in their mouth, and they were going to make them spit on me. So that was okay. I didn't get spit on that time, so I got lucky. Another kind of story of the academy. I think I probably got about 3 minutes left, right, Scott? Just want to check the time. Okay. So obviously another big thing, the military. So at least I'm in the Navy. So once again, unlike the Marines, if you see, and even the Army, maybe even the Air Force, I don't know, they all have these special haircuts. Everyone likes to get the same type of haircut. Where in the Navy, we're a little bit more relaxed, but you still, the Navy barbers don't realize that. So especially never go to a barber on a Marine base because you'll get a Marine style haircut. I learned that in Hawaii. When I didn't ask for one, they still gave it to me. But so obviously the challenge is the payas. So the regulations are you can get away with basically the minimum that you need for payas right by your the bone right here. But if you're not explicitly telling the barber and watching him, don't cut my hair over here, no matter what, they just go and shave you up the side to make it shorter because that's the regulation. And then you always got to watch out for the upperclassmen midshipmen who yell at you because your hair's a little too long. So then that story, since I talked about the fact that they put in a position of authority. So I think it was it's probably one Shabbos. So over the summer you run a lot. So if you haven't run a lot, for those who are familiar, you get shin splints and you hurt your legs. So I got the opportunity. So keeping Shabbos at the academy, I got the opportunity to go out to Knesset Israel in Annapolis. So I know some of you, I think like the Rosenblatts, some of you know them. So I met Rebbetzin Rosenblatt when I was there. And so one Shabbos, I'm in my uniform because you had to wear it out in town in my whites, hobbling along because I'm limping because my leg hurts. And all of a sudden a car pulls up next to me and they're like, "What are you doing?" I'm like, just walking back. And just remember, I did get special permission. So this is one of the things where once again they do accommodate. So normally during your first year when you're a plebe as a freshman, Liberty starts at noon or after the football game. So that means you can't go out in town. But davening Shachris was like at 9 o'clock. So I got special permission to leave early. So here I am, this lone plebe out on my own. They probably thought that I broke out or snuck out, even though I was wearing my uniform. And the guy starts telling me, "No, get in the car. I don't care what you say. Just get in the car." And I'm like, "I can't. It's Shabbos." But then turns around. There's a guy sitting in the passenger seat. And he's like, "Oh, what'd you say? Oh, Shabbos?" And he goes to the other guy. He's like, "Oh, I got this. I'm Jewish. I know what he means. I drive." He's like, "I drive my car, but," and then then he let me go, and it was all good. It was fine there. So that's one of those pressures where like it is a challenge, so to say, when you're put in this situation, especially when you're a lower rank. So as that that you got to it's a challenge because you got to get the confidence to speak up. A lot of people they'll accommodate you, but they just don't know. And no matter how many times I ate microwave dinners, people would offer me food anyways, even though they knew I wasn't going to eat it. So, or at least I would have assumed they thought that. So I'll leave you with one more story, not about the academy, but it's I think my kid's favorite story so far. So my wife reminded me of a different one, so I'll share this one. This one's better. this is called there was a drink at the Naval Academy. So during Army Navy week, when the Navy usually routes the Army football team, usually before the week, there's all this spirit week they have. So they play these games. So I don't know if you've seen in the news sometimes, because like there was I think a few years ago there was an incident at West Point where they were beating each other up with pillows, but I guess they stuck like, I don't know, metal in the pillows. They injured some people. So every now and then somebody gets injured and it gets in the news. But either way, a lot of antics happen during that week. So one of the things is this beat Army drink. So the beat Army drink is like, if you get whoever went to the dining out and you saw Michael Rosenoff's grog, if you remember, had pieces of food in it and matzah. I don't know what it was. So the beat Army drink is that. So I thought I would get out of it because I'm like, oh, I can't. They're not going to do this because they'll put like food in it. I'm like, I can't. It's not kosher. So I'm like, sweet. Excellent. I don't have to do it. I told the guy, I can't do it. I'm kosher. Lo and behold, I got lucky for me, the upper class was from New Jersey. And so he lived in a Jewish area. So he said, oh, don't worry, I got this taken care of. He comes with his bottle of hot sauce that said, like, for 5-alarm family-sized chili, put in a couple drops. And he's like, hey, look at this. It's got a kosher symbol on it, doesn't it? So they made, and I'm like, oh, great. Yes, sir. So they threw like celery and, I don't know, orange juice and kosher ketchup, and then this hot sauce. And that was probably the most vile thing that I had to drink ever in my life. And puked all over the place afterwards. So that was not pleasant. So you never know who you run into who does know a thing or two about kosher, so it's not always a good excuse. Okay.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Commander. Appreciate your stories. And see, we have war stories from all branches of the service, and he had some particularly funny ones there. Our next speaker is Major Daniel Selig. He is from the United States Army, and he transitioned recently from to be in the military and to be a doctor and to be more frum. He's a Baal Tshuva. That's got to be a challenge. And so we're going to hear a little bit about what he does right now and maybe some of his stories. So Major Selig.
Thank you very much. And thanks for everyone coming today. I just want to start by saying thanks and remembering all the fallen heroes. Actually, Miss Stokes was my patient while I was in training in Bethesda Hospital. And her Neshama Shnev and Aliyah, we became pretty close as, I was helping her with some medical issues. So first, I'm just going to start with a brief overview of what military medicine is. Then I'll let everyone know a little bit about myself and how I got in the military. And I have a couple anecdotes, one or two, depending on how much time we have. So military medicine is under the auspices of the military health system. It's a large system. There's about 10 million beneficiaries, and it includes active duty soldiers, active duty Navy, Army, Marines, their families, and veterans. It's a completely separate entity from the VA system. So generally, persons who retired with the military are eligible for care in the military health system, where other veterans who didn't make it all the way to retirement get care from the VA system. It's a worldwide system. There's hospitals all throughout the United States, large hospitals that range from academic centers like Harvard Medical Center, which would be something like Walter Reed, where there's a lot of research done. You're seeing all the rarest cases. A similar base and scope would be in Texas. And then there's small community clinics that are in the middle of nowhere. That you have all the way to where, to the front of the battlefield, where you really, in the Army, it's where the medics go. They are really high speed. Their equivalent degree is an LPN, but they're far more trained than a typical LPN. They can do airway management. They can stop bleeding. They have high training. The next level of care is a forward surgical team or a small hospital right close to the battlefield, a little further away, where you have access to x-ray. Surgeons, emergency doctors will be there to take care of any battle injuries that need to be plugged up right away. And then From there, you can transition to slightly bigger in-field hospitals. The biggest hubs in the world are in Germany. It's a hospital in Landstuhl. There's other similar hubs in South Korea, but the main place where all soldiers are medevaced is Germany. And it's a pretty neat system. The medical population in the United States military is almost an exact proportional mirror of the population at large. So in terms of race, demographics, breakdown, I would say though that the access to care is generally better because there's no real difference in socioeconomic status. So that's the main difference when you're talking about the health system, because even the lowest ranking know they can go somewhere to get care. So everybody gets pretty much equal care, and it ends up being a pretty great system. There's a couple ways to become a doctor in the military. You can either go through your full training, do a residency in any specialty pretty much, and the military would be happy to have you, and you can sign up afterwards. They incentivize this with loan payback programs, and it's not really dependent on which service. All the services, I believe by law, are required to offer the same deal. So you could sign up for the Navy, Army, Air Force, and the Public Health Service also is a service of doctors. It's not a military service, but it's a uniform service which provides care to the Navy, Marines, Indian Health Services, FDA. There's a lot of services that they have a hand in. The choice is really up to the individual. There's some nuances about medicine in any service. And the other way is, there's two other ways. You can go to the military medical school in Bethesda, and you're actually an active duty officer from the time you're in medical school, which is pretty incredible to think about because you're getting paid $60,000 or $70,000 a year just to study medicine. The way that I got in was similar to an ROTC scholarship. It's called HPSP, the Health Professions Scholarship Program. And with that, you can go to any civilian medical school in the United States or Puerto Rico, and the military will pay for your medical school, give you a stipend to live, and you owe them basically 4 years, 1 year for each scholarship. So you're not locked in forever. It is a long time. So where I am now in my training, I grew up in Silver Spring. I went to Washington International School my whole life. I was part of the team, if anyone remembers, where Berman beat our basketball team in 2005. We had, Rabbi Grauman's son, Zombie, was on that team, and I actually played against him. He lit me up that game. I don't know if anyone remembers that game, but I went on to Franklin and Marshall College, and I played college basketball there. At this point, I was always involved with Hillel. I wasn't really involved in religious Judaism, but I knew I was Jewish, and I loved all the Jewish customs. But it was kind of hard to be a religious Jew when you're playing basketball games on Saturday and going out with the boys, having fun. So it wasn't really too much of an interest, for me to keep Shabbos then. But I always, had the Pintel Yid in my heart, and I kind of knew I wanted to be more connected. I went on later. I thought I wanted to be a mathematician, and I got free, basically an offer to go to grad school for free for math. So I did that for a while. I didn't enjoy it as much as I thought, but during that time, I was able to go on the Birthright Israel trip. And, classic story, I was at the wall, and the Chabad Rebbe helped me wrap tefillin. And when I was at the wall, I knew how to read a little Hebrew from growing up in Reform and conservative synagogues, but I read it in English because I wanted to know what I was saying this time. And it said, you have to teach your kids. And I realized I didn't know anything about Judaism or who I was, even though I felt like I was Jewish. I didn't know anything. So when I came back that summer, this whole time I was applying to medical school, mostly, I wasn't the kind of kid who wanted to be a doctor his whole life. I just wanted a steady job and to be able to raise a family. I end up, loving it. Thank God now. It's a big bracha and a zechus to have this. But I came back, and my mom still lives in Aspen Hill, and I just decided if I wanted to learn about Torah, I have to go to synagogue, and I have to go to the real deal. So I went to, there's a small synagogue attached to Berman, and there are a lot of families that took me in. One was Moshe Starkman. There's a family, I can't remember the last, actually I think it's Newman, the Newman family. People may know them. The dad works at NASA, I think. And they all took me in. They taught me what it meant to be a Jew, what it meant to keep Shabbos. Obviously, it's hard to go from zero to everything. So, I loved it. I was kind of all in, but it's hard just to change your habits. It was really hard to take on Shabbos. In the meantime, I finally, got accepted to one of the 30 medical schools I applied to. It was, Temple Medicine in Philadelphia. So I accepted. At the time, I had heard about this military scholarship. I didn't really know anything about the military, but I knew that they would pay for medical school, and I couldn't afford it. And I didn't want to be hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. And I liked the idea of serving the country. So I went around to different recruiters. I started with the Navy, with the Air Force, because I heard, the Air Force, the famous joke is it's the chair force, because, they get to sit in air conditioning, and I heard it was the best lifestyle, but I just didn't get along with the recruiter. And in the end, it's probably directly from Hashem. I decided to go to the Army. That recruiter was a lot, cooler. He played video games, and that's the main reason why I signed with the Army. Now I know the nuances. So if anyone has questions and anyone's considering a scholarship, please talk to me afterwards, and I can give you a breakdown of medicine in each service. But with that, I kind of went to medical school. I knew I wanted to be more Jewish. I knew I wanted to marry someone Jewish, but I wasn't yet sure if I should really be completely Shomer Shabbos. So I ended up actually finding a place in North Philly, right across the street from the medical school, because it was cheap. And, you're poor as a medical student. I got a $1,000 or $2,000 stipend. Anyways, I found myself, I called, I really missed Shabbos so much. And I knew I made a mistake when I chose to live outside the Jewish community. I started calling about 2 or 3 hours before Shabbos, the first Shabbos I was there, all the rabbis in town. And the only one that answered happened to be a rabbi from Eitz Chaim in Philadelphia, North Philadelphia. And Eitz Chaim's not a synagogue. I didn't know this. It's actually a Kiruv program. So Hashem connected me with a Kiruv rabbi, and he was able to connect with Moshe Starkman to make sure I wasn't, a terrorist or someone, someone who was going to just, someone, God forbid, that was bad for them. And he took me in, and for the next few weeks, I started keeping Shabbos with him, and he taught me even more and strengthened my connection with Shabbos. Obviously, it's still I was still wavering. So then I was keeping Shabbos for a while in my first year and not. And when you're in military medicine, your first summer between years 1 and 2 of medical school is you're going to boot camp. So I had to make a decision, because I knew in my heart I wanted to be Jewish, but if I wasn't serious about it, the military would not be serious about it. And you can't go to the military and ask for an exemption for Shabbos when you yourself aren't even sure if you're keeping it or not. So when I went to boot camp, this was probably one of the hardest things I ever did. Putting a kippah on in front of my other 300 medical students in my class. I came into medical school, college basketball player, cool guy, going to bars. Then all of a sudden I started keeping Shabbos, putting on a kippah, and everybody ripped on me. They made fun of me. It was horrific. But honestly, it was kind of the kick in the pants that I needed to be humble and to change my lifestyle, to be a Torah Jew. So that not only did I feel humiliated, but it was in the end, it was all for the good. And now I feel so comfortable wearing a kippah. It never was a question whether I could wear it at work, because I got ridiculed so much in medical school for a few months after I put it on. Anyways, I didn't know anything about yeshivish, all this kind of stuff. My brother was also becoming religious at the same time, and he went to UPenn. And I learned a lot about being Jewish from the kids at UPenn who maintained minyan. They had more of a, I guess most people would call it a Zionistic approach. A lot of people had a hashkaf of Berman there, and they really taught me what is meant to be kind. And so I wore a knitted kippah. So it was a blue, bright knitted kippah that I wore to boot camp. Now, I didn't know anything about boot camp either, because when you're going into medicine, they just teach you nothing about the military. They sign you up, and then you're part of the military, and that's it. So when I got to boot camp, I wasn't in regulation with my haircut, my kippah, or uniform. And I'll end with this anecdote just for the sake of time. But I was there lining up every day. It's pretty relaxed for doctor boot camp. I mean, with Commander Kinsberner, he was saying his was more relaxed even than enlisted. Ours, we had off every weekend. We were put up in a hotel. I thought it was going to be like these comedy movies. I grew up watching all these strict military. So I didn't know if I was allowed to shave or not shave. I knew there's some issue with payas, and I didn't know how to get around it, but I did know my rabbi at home told me I could at least use a clipper. So I was clipping pretty close. It was obvious that I didn't really shave clean. But anyways, a few days go by and nobody even noticed. I was in line, in formation with a few other 100 officers. And finally one day, one of the drill sergeants kind of got up to me and said, sir, did you shave? And I had made a good friend, and he stood next to me. He was prior enlisted and switched over to the officer corps. And he said, just back off. This guy has a religious exemption. And I said, yeah, I'll take one of those. So I didn't really know what that meant. You can actually get a religious exemption. Anyways, I'd just like to say thanks right now to Dr. Cohen, he and his family and his son, Max, took me in every Shabbos while I was in boot camp, pretty much. And I got to meet them and get to know them. And again, learn what it was like to be a Jew and take care of other Jews. So when I was there was a chaplain. I can't remember the rabbi's name, but he was a reservist colonel called to active duty, and he didn't shave. And I told him I needed an exemption for shaving, and I saw he had a clean shaven face, and he said, are you sure that you need an exemption? He said, why don't you just shave with this type of razor? It's allowed. And I was like, okay, that sounds good. So this is just a little story to highlight how confusing it was to become Jewish and in the military at the same time, learn both customs. But thank God I was able to get my head straight, and I got married to a really nice Jewish girl, and I'm raising a family here in Kent Mill right now. I've been stationed in the community. So thanks for everyone for organizing this, and I appreciate your time and attention. And please reach out for any questions after the event.
Thank you very much, Major. Excellent story. Very inspiring. We will have questions at the end, so if you want to send through the chat, I will go ahead and read those questions out here. If we have time, we'll have time for some questions for sure. So our next speaker on the panel is Major Michael Rosenoff, who just recently left this area. He transferred to Albuquerque. He's still technically in the Air Force, but he'll soon be making a transition to the Space Force, and will be promoted to Lieutenant Colonel by September. So he is got a lot of challenges out there in Albuquerque, I would imagine. And he's going to share a few of his experiences and tell us a little bit about what he does. Michael Rosenoff. And by the way, there's a new term of address for, I'm an airman. I'm in the Air Force, and the Navy, there's seamen, and the soldiers in the Army. The Space Force, they're guardians. And they're the guardians of the galaxy, I guess. Okay, I'm sorry, Major. Don't take it out on me. Go ahead, yeah. Major Rosenoff.
Yeah, we are. Thanks, Scott. Yeah, we are happy to finally assume the mantle of most made fun of service from the Air Force. This is the best thing that ever happened to the Air Force, the founding of the Space Force. Yeah, and also thanks, Scott, for working me into the schedule at the last minute. I think, as he mentioned, the Shelter Guards welcomed a baby girl the other day. So very happy for them. We're very close with their family. Baby Eliezer, I think is her name. She was just named this morning, I believe. So yeah, I would just start just by briefly saying, like, why did I join? They say that every interaction with anyone outside the military is a recruiting opportunity. So in case anyone or anyone's son or daughter or cousin is considering joining the military, I think it'd be interesting to hear perspective of why I joined. Right, so it was twofold. My reason: one, of course, I grew up with with patriotism for this country. I wanted to serve the country, but there are 1,000 different ways to serve the country. Since I was about 6, I knew I wanted to be an aerospace engineer. So I looked at my different options, considered the Navy. Eric Kinsbrenner is an excellent example of how you can serve in a very similar capacity in the Navy. Looked into very briefly the Army, Air Force. Air Force. I was more interested in space than air, and the Air Force pretty much owned space. So that was it for me. There are other ways, and I happily accept any playful criticism of the Air Force or especially the Space Force. There are other ways to serve that maybe require more toughness, more deploying to austere locations, more dealing with hardship in general. For better or for worse, many jobs in the Air Force, and arguably probably more so in the Space Force, are not that difficult in that regard. They're difficult in many other ways, but each one of these different jobs is crucial to national security. What I do, I'm an engineer. I work in essentially research and development, and kind of with a warfighter perspective. So there are civilians and contractors and private companies that are doing a lot of the actual R&D, but it takes people in uniform to coordinate all of that in a way that's beneficial for military operations. That's my job. And if people didn't do that, we wouldn't win any wars. You know, I'm sure you've heard some of the stories about the founding of the Space Force. The reason for it, we depend on space, and if it weren't for things happening in space with military for military purposes, we wouldn't really be able to support operations anywhere else. So yeah, I applaud, genuinely, I applaud all my peers who are you know, sleeping in tents, sleeping not in tents, in the desert in 120 degrees. I haven't had to do that. I wouldn't shirk. I wouldn't say no to the opportunity, but that's just not necessary for the way that I have served so far. Also, I would mention that the patriotism thing. This is related to the topic at hand. My love of this country, and I think a lot of people here probably share this sentiment, is rooted mostly in my identity as a Jew. I recognize very clearly how important this country is for the whole world, for freedom, for the cause of freedom for everyone, but especially for us. And I think that, and I've talked to other Jews in the military who feel the same way, that we especially have a special reason to be patriotic here, and maybe have a special obligation to pay back. Anyway, enough about why I joined. And I mentioned there are lots of different ways to serve. I've so far pretty much lucked out in that regard. My first assignment out of college, I did ROTC in college. That's how I earned my commission. First assignment was at Edwards Air Force Base, which if you've ever seen The Right Stuff or pretty much any other action movie, you know Edwards Air Force Base. It was a great place to spend my first assignment. Partly because I was only an hour drive from Los Angeles, and kosher food and as many shuls as you could ever want. And there was a Chabad in the town that I lived in out there. So when I couldn't make it down to LA, I was pretty well covered. After that, I moved so far away to Los Angeles itself. Spent the next 4 years in Los Angeles, where within the Air Force and now kind of more particularly the Space Force, there are a handful of places where there's, look at the Venn diagram of places the Air Force or the Space Force could send me, places where I could have live in a vibrant Jewish community. And there's a decent amount of overlap. So Los Angeles, now when you join, you can't really control where you're going to live. But I sort of lucked out in a few different times. So Los Angeles, that's kind of the hub of Air Force and now Space Force development of systems, of technology. So I worked there for a few years. And then that's where I met Dina. We got married while living there, or while I was living there. And then right after getting married, when the ink was still wet on the ketubah, I got my orders to go to Dayton, Ohio, which of all places in the world was not that difficult for Judaism, but it was a shock compared to Los Angeles. I think this is where I would say the toughest challenge has come for us, and for me in particular, but really for our family. Just not having that much control over where we're going to live. I clawed my way to the Pentagon for many reasons, partly so that we could live in Kent Mill. We knew about the community. We really wanted to live there. I joked, for those of you who were at the dining out last year, I joked there that Washington, D.C. is kind of the hub of U.S. military Frumkeit, that there's kind of one place where all the services can get together, where from people from all the services can get together and have a really great place to work, and also a really great place to live and have a community and send your kids to day school, and that's DC. So anyone who's ever passed through DC, lived in Kent Mill or a couple of the other communities, we all kind of keep in touch. We still feel like we're part of this community. That's why I'm so glad Scott remembered me, even though we left a few months ago. So Tova, our 5-year-old, who who was 4 when we left, she misses it too. We really hope we'll get to go back there sometime. But yeah, the community, those of us who have passed through DC and Kent Mill in particular, and Schomer in particular, even, we keep in touch. We're a like Scott said, we're a subculture within a subculture, within a subculture in this case. That's one of the kind of hidden gems of being in the military and being from that. Yes, there aren't that many of us because we're a small group within a small group, but it's a pretty tight knit community. We keep up. There's a Facebook group my wife Dina is part of called From Military Spouses, and she gets lots of awesome stories and lots of stories from people who never imagined that they would be living in weird places, sharing how they were able to have have a Jewish life in weird places. So we're kind of doing that now. We live in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where we doubled the Frum population. It's actually not an exaggeration, not including the Chabad. Thank God there's a Chabad here, but there's one other Frum family. So we actually doubled the Frum population in the city. And this is a place, we joke about this all the time, this is a place we never would have considered living if not, if the Air Force / Space Force hadn't sent us here. But we're loving it. If I got out right now, we'd probably move back to DC. But there are, for those considering, or those whose children or cousins are considering joining the military, there are several places. Denver, in the Air Force, there's a lot to do in Denver, and there's a great community there. There are a couple other places. Obviously, I'm not going to promise that if you join, you'll get to live in a Jewish community, but it really isn't as bad as you might imagine. If you're someone like me and you get sent to these cushy places over and over again. Yeah, so like I said, the hardship is really in finding community wherever we go, but also just moving. That's something for not just Jews, but anyone in the military. Imagine packing up your house every 2 or 3 years for 20 plus years. You get pretty good at it after a couple moves, but I've known people who've done this like 15 times. And if you are not part of that lifestyle, you just can't imagine how A, difficult it is, and B, freeing it is, that you get to set up your life over and over again and get it better every time. So I guess I'll speak also a little bit about where the conflict might be between Judaism and military service. So I think all of us will have similar experiences here where mission requirements dictate that you do something that you wouldn't want to do, like work on Shabbos, that kind of thing. Thankfully, I've only had to wrestle with this a couple times. When I was a lieutenant, when I was a junior officer, brief digression. I'm sure there's no way for me to collect a show of hands, but if you've ever been to an air show, I'm sure most of us have been to air shows. Air shows are a lot of fun, unless you work at the Air Force Base. Then they're a nightmare. They're fun, but it's. I used to joke. I worked at an air show once that the total amount of happiness is constant. So if you have 1 million guests and like 100 people working there, that like all the enjoyment those 1 million people get has to be taken from those 100 people. So there's an air show on Saturday. I tried to get out of working there, and my commander did not give me any special dispensation. I made the case, and I said, okay, I'll follow orders. Strange that like the time I have to break Shabbat is not for like running some important mission. It's just to run an air show. But I arranged with a friend who lived on base. This is at Edwards Air Force Base. He let me stay in his house. I didn't carry anything. I walked all the way from his house to the flight line, did a total of about 20 miles of walking that day. But the point of that story is mainly to demonstrate that like whenever, yes, there will be times in the military when they make me do something that either violates Shabbat or something else. But usually there's a way to find a balance. Usually there's a way to still honor both commitments. The metaphor I always like to use is, so Eric Kinsberger mentioned the haircut. Don't get your haircut at a Marine base. So in the Air Force, the requirement for a man's sideburns is that your sideburn has to be above the bottom of the inside of your ear. So it's like this line over here. And then the halacha is that it has to be below the bone here, right? So at least the way my skull is shaped, that gives me about a quarter of an inch of overlap. And I use that as a metaphor for kind of everything. I'm living according to two separate strict sets of rules. But if you're creative and you understand both sets of rules well enough, you can pretty much always find that quarter inch where you're following all the rules. Yeah, it's more it's harder than if you only had to follow one set, but it's by no means impossible. When friends of mine who are not Jewish in the Air Force have asked me how I can keep track of all these rules, I always say, like, you think it's hard for me to keep track of these rules? At what point do you put your hat on when you walk out of a door? Do you put your hat on as the door is opening, as you approach the door, as you leave? It's like, no, I put it on, yeah, as I leave. Like, okay, how do you keep track of how complicated that rule is? Like, no, you live a lifestyle. So that's how I explain Judaism to non-Jews in the military, and that's how I would explain military rules, regulations to someone who is Torah observant and not in the military. It's not as hard as it might look. And that, of course, granted, I've had an easier time than a lot of people. Yeah, and then I think the other anecdote, disconnected, that I wanted to share was just I remember when I was in field training, which is kind of like the watered down boot camp for ROTC cadets. We had kind of a down day on Sunday because it was in keeping with Christian tradition. On Saturday, I always asked to be accommodated, and they were very welcoming, very accommodating rather. And I remember they offered me. There's a Jewish service you can go to Friday night. And so that's great. What are the details? Okay, well, yeah, you just meet over here, and a bus will take you off base, and you'll go to Friday night services at this Reform shul. And I said, okay, these people had no idea of the difference between Reform, Conservative, Orthodox. And at that point, I was Bal Tshuva on my way, but I was keeping Shabbat by that point. I didn't feel put upon that they're not accommodating my Shabbat observance. I felt honored. I felt so well taken care of. These people, they didn't know better. They really did care. They really did want to accommodate me. Just like Eric Kinsbrenner's story with the food. I've only ever encountered this attitude. That if I say, hey, I have this genuinely held religious belief, I'd like to do this, which is against the regulations, or it's against what everyone else is doing, 100% of the time, people at all levels of command have said, I'll do whatever you need to do. We value your service. We respect that you want to keep these rules, and they'll help me out. The hard part is just for me. It's hard for me sometimes to ask because I don't. That's a personal problem. That's not the Air Force's or the Space Force's problem. It's sometimes hard to stand out, but that's kind of our job. Not just in the military. That's our job as Jews sometimes to stand out. I always compare it to the time my ancestors must have had in the Russian army 100 years ago. They were not so accommodating. Most other countries in this world not as accommodating. So I'm thankful, rather than ever complain about times it's been hard to maintain my Jewish practice in the military. I am extremely grateful for just how accommodating it really is. And I wish we could do like a question answer thing, because I don't want to bore anyone with details about space, but I wish people would ask me so I could justify just talking about space for the next hour.
I sent you a question about space junk.
Oh, space junk. Okay, let me just see the chat.
We're going to hold off the questions until the end, so we can get through the program. I know there's still some people who have contributions to make, but I appreciate it very much, Major, your service, and I look forward to hearing more about that space junk in a little bit. So, but first, let's go on to our next speaker. Our next speaker is Lieutenant First Lieutenant Hector Marascal. He's a member of the Army National Guard. Prior to going to the National Guard, he was active duty Army as well. So, Lieutenant Marascal, are you there?
Hi, how's everybody doing? Good afternoon. So yes, thank you so much, Major Rosenoff, for your part. It was like interesting because Space Force is so new and we don't know like all the details of it. So it's very fascinating. I'm going to keep my part short, and you're free to ask as many questions as you want of me down the road. But my story is more or less as Major Rosenoff did. I was also part of ROTC, but I was Army ROTC, so it was a very different experience. I commissioned out of Rutgers University in New Brunswick, New Jersey, out of their ROTC program. So that was now a while back. It's hard to imagine. But my whole story of transitioning to becoming religious started around there. I was an MS2 going into an MS3. So at the MS is used as military science. And MS1 is your freshman year, MS2 your sophomore year, so on and so forth. And then by MS4 you're a senior. So as an MS2 going into MS3, they're preparing you for, as Major Rosenoff said, like a major training operation or major training event where they evaluate your leadership skills. We called it in the Army LDAC, Leadership Development and Assessment course. I think it's called something else at this point, but the idea behind it with everything going on was just getting you ready to assume the mantle of an officer. And so my story, one of the stories that I like to share with people is when I was becoming religious, I had my rabbi come in to talk to my professor of military science. This is a lieutenant colonel, gruff guy. He's been to war like twice. So it was very, very interesting seeing this like, very scholarly gentleman as my rabbi discussing the Torah and my commitments to Judaism and and everything else. So I remember the meeting where they're sitting together, and the rabbi's asking that on Shabbat, he asked that my bags be carried by somebody else. And the colonel looked at him like he had two faces and looked at me like, yeah, dude, that's not happening. So it was a funny moment now looking back, but at the time, like I was sweating bullets because I was like, I don't know how this is gonna all play out. Like this could go really bad. So I spoke to, like when I was speaking to the rabbi, I was like, okay, rabbi, we're gonna be inside a base. We're gonna be inside a military installation. There's fence around it and everything. Couldn't that be considered an Eruv? And he's like, well, I'll have to get back to you, but yeah, there's a possibility it could be considered an Eruv. So he got back to me and said, like, if they make these modifications, then it could be seen as an Eruv. And that's what we did. And then I was able to like participate. So there was other things too that I couldn't do, obviously. Keeping kosher and keeping Shabbat was very difficult. But I worked with leadership both on the military side as well as my rabbi to understand the best way to accommodate both. Like Major Rosenoff was saying, that like little bit of space, that little bit of like trade space you have can make all the difference. And so that was what I used to get through it. And then commissioning as an officer, being responsible for 30 soldiers was challenging because on Shabbat you either have to stay on the armory because that's what we have in the National Guard, or you have to have a split training, which you come in on Friday and Sunday. So managing that was really challenging, as you can imagine, but it's doable. I think most of these things are doable. I think being an active duty is probably easier to accommodate both commitments, but I think with the Guard as as Airman Fuchsia will talk about in the future, he's made it happen and he's done an excellent job of it. So that's all I have right now. If anybody has questions down the road, I'm more than happy to talk about it. If you see me walking around, feel free to ask, like, hey, I got a question over this, I got a question over that. And as some of my colleagues have mentioned earlier, there are a lot of opportunities in the military, both on the Guard, Reserve, and active duty side for young men and women who are interested. Obviously, we're not recruiting, we're not like trying to promote the military, but we're saying that it is a viable alternative to, the usual doctor, lawyer, business person that you hear in the community that we're kind of all funneled into for government work. Anyway, that's all I have. Thank you, Sergeant Schlesinger, and I'm going to pass the baton off.
All right. Well, thank you, Lieutenant. We appreciate your comments and your experiences. And now we've got one last panelist here who, when we're talking active duty, this gentleman is right now in training. He completed basic training in January, and he's now in his technical school, tech school in Shepherd Air Force Base in Texas, where he's learning his skills so that he can perform those skills for the United States Air Force. And I'm talking about Airman First Class Jared Fuchsia, who is also here in the community, who is going to be working in the Air National Guard. So he'll be working to support our Maryland Guard. And so Jared, Airman Fuchsia, would you please talk to us a little bit about where you came from? And do I understand that you work the food truck here in the area? I understand.
Yes, sir.
That's your primary job. So go ahead.
Yes.
You have to unmute, I'm afraid.
Unmute. All right. Can you hear me now? Okay, great. So yeah, I finished basic training back in January on the enlisted side of the Air Force, which is, I'm in the Air National Guard specifically. And I guess where I'm coming from, I'm also a Baal Teshuva, so I grew up in the Reform movement. So I became crazy in college and came from. So I got brainwashed by rabbis, but I say that half-heartedly. So yeah, basic training as a from person was easy on the one hand, and then it had some other difficulties. On the one hand, like the kosher situation really wasn't hard because they have kosher MREs. So I ate those for 2 months straight, literally 3 times a day. And some people were like, initially they wouldn't let me have that because, MREs are filled with sodium preservatives. And they're like, you're not going to be able to, your stomach won't be able to take it. Baruch Hashem, I didn't have any issues. The one issue maybe I did have trying to get that accommodation was the Jewish chaplain didn't want to sign off on me having them like every day. So that the one obstacle that I did have in training was from a Jewish chaplain, sad to say. But thank God they were very accommodating. And so kosher was easy. I didn't get to eat as much because obviously I was very limited. And so I, as Major Kinsbrunner said earlier, I also survived a lot on tuna, sometimes on stuff that expired 4 years ago. That also didn't give me any issues. And as far as Shabbos goes, Shabbos was very easy in basic training because you don't have your phone. You're not doing a whole lot with electronics. It's mainly just doing PT physical training on Saturdays, which, isn't in the spirit of Shabbos, but it's also, not technically breaking Shabbos. So that was pretty easy. One funny story is my MTIs, my military training instructors, they knew the whole thing. They got to learn all about Judaism, like during their time with me. And so I remember one time Friday evening, it was after chow, I was asked to help move a piece of machinery from one room to another. And then I was doing that. And then my military training instructor comes in and he's like, Fuchsia, what are you doing? It's after sundown. It's the Sabbath. You can't do that. And I was like, sir, trainee Fuchsia reports is ordered. There's actually, there's not a problem for me to do this. And he was like, so you can't flick on a light switch, but you can move a several 100-pound piece of machinery. And I was like, yes, sir. And he was like, I give up. So that was cute. But they were very nice, and I didn't have any issues with either really being observant. I was there during Hanukkah, so I didn't get to light Hanukkah candles, sadly. because there's no fire in the dorm rule. And yeah, as far as I got to put on tefillin every day, and I found a time to daven, 2 times a day, and keep up with the parsha of the week. And I'm sorry, I didn't have a lot of stuff prepared. I was gonna see if people were gonna ask me questions, more. That's me. I'm still in the embryonic stage, whereas everyone else is kind of more advanced at this point in their military careers. I'm kind of like a baby right now. So.
All right. Well, thank you, Airman Fuchsia. But actually, that leads me right to some of the questions that we have. Okay, one of the first questions that were put into the chat room was, why did you join? And I guess that would be for anybody who's interested in answering. We can go ahead. But what was the impetus behind your joining the military? So if you want to take that on, Airman Fuchsia.
Sure. So I joined after almost a decade or so. When I was 18, I actually wanted to join the Marines, and then I chickened out because it was the height of the Iraq War, and I was just like, I got scared. Otherwise, I always wanted to join the military and serve. And so then after college, when I wanted to do the JAG program, I was saying, I'll join this time, and I'm going to go, get law school paid for me by the military. And then when I ditched the idea of law school, it was always on the back burner for me that, I wanted to join. But then by this time I was the main thing was, how can I be from observant in the military? People were telling me it's impossible. Don't try. Don't go near it. Just last year I decided, you know what, I'm turned 30. I better join before it's too late. And by that time I talked with other from people who were able to guide me along. I had a very dear friend who was also in the Air Force, who was from the same time. He was in the Air Force. Now he's Hasidish. So he's like, the Air Force actually, he said, pushed him even more and more into Yiddishkeit, interestingly enough. So I joined, one, to better myself for my journey. And then the second part was my Hekar Satov for the United States of America. I know that's a very cookie cutter cliche answer. Sorry, but I wanted to give back. This country has been good to me, to Jews, and to, been a beacon of light and religious liberty. So I felt Kal v'chomer as a from Jew. If you can make it work, it's a great Kiddush Hashem. So that was my impetus for joining.
Very good, very good. Major Selig, are you still there?
Yes, I'm here. Yes.
Somebody wanted to know who was the sandik for your eldest son's bris.
The sandik for my eldest son's bris was Rav Shmuel Kamenetsky, the Rosh Yeshiva of Philly Yeshiva. Thank God, yeah. I have a story about it if you want to hear, but
let's go.
Well, I didn't know much about Jewish custom when I had my son. I mean, my wife's parents are Baal Teshuva, and my parents are connected with Judaism, but not in an Orthodox, kind of way. So when I had my son, I asked my friend who should I ask to be the sandik, and he was one of the rabbis in the town, at kind of a Kiruv rabbi, and he said, you should ask the most important person, the most chashuv person in town. So I said, well, who is that? And he said, it's, the Rosh Yeshiva of Philadelphia Yeshiva. And I, he just basically said, go knock on his door. And I said, I can knock on someone of that stature's door. So I went to the yeshiva and I did what my Rebbe told me to do. And I knocked on the Rosh Yeshiva's door, and he was in the middle of a conversation with somebody in his office, and he stopped his whole conversation to talk to me. He schmoozed with me for 10 minutes, and he penciled me in his schedule just to go to show you the mitos of the Gedolei Hador, that they'll interrupt. It's so important for them, even one mitzvah, to be the sandik for my son. And, I come from nowhere. I'm a Baal Teshuva, and he didn't know me. And so that made a big impact on me. You really see top-down leadership, and people really live by what they believe.
Oh, very good. Very good. There was another question about the thoughts of glass ceiling. Does there a glass ceiling exist in the military? And I think that a lot of us answered the same question already, but if you'll allow me to take that one on, I was selected to work in the office of the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I worked under General Colin Powell and General Shali Kashvili. I'm a frum Jew. I'm there in the Pentagon, and I saw plenty of Jews in the military, and I don't think that impeded your career at all, or it could impede your career if you didn't handle it correctly. But again, Major Rosenoff mentioned that I'm going to have to use that analogy from now on. That quarter inch of flexibility, but no, if how you handle yourself in the military, I think is a great predictor of your career. And so I don't think there is any glass ceilings. Certainly there can be some impediments from some people, but you can get past those normally. I have my one experience when I took over a school in Myrtle Beach. The school used to have graduation ceremonies on Friday nights, and that would cause me a great concern because I can't officiate these graduation ceremonies. And so I went to the NCO club where these ceremonies are normally conducted, and I talked to the manager there, and I asked him, I says, what's your busiest night of the week? And he says, well, it's Friday, Saturday night. I said, well, doesn't it bother you that we hold our graduation ceremonies on a Friday night that competes with your normally business, busy business? And he says, yeah, it's a problem. I says, well, I think I can get that changed. I'm going to get it changed to Thursday. He says, you can do that? I says, I'm the commandant of the school. I can get that done. And so I went and changed the graduation ceremonies to Thursday night. And they thought I was doing that for them, and I was doing it for them. It was a big mitzvah, and we accomplished it. And we had graduations on Thursday nights and contributed to the business of the NCO club. So there are a lot of different ways to conduct yourself in the military. I got to tell you, I'm very impressed with the panelists here. They are the next generation. But before we leave today, what I'd like to do is to honor our fallen comrades. And one of the ways we do that is by taking a moment of silence. And I'd like to play taps. If you will bear with me.
My apologies. I couldn't hear what you said.
Oh, that's my Siri wants to talk to me here. So if you will bear with me, we'll listen to taps in memory of our fallen comrades. Okay, I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. It was very interesting. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. And I can send out to the shul the addresses if you have questions specifically for any of the panelists. I'm sure that they'd be anxious to respond. I know Colonel Cohen, I know you want to talk about space junk, but I'm being prompted to leave the program here at this point. So if there's no other questions or comments, I'm going to wish you all fine time with your family here. Remember what the day is all about, and recognize that there are people in this country and in this community who are helping to protect our country and making sacrifices daily on that account. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Scott. Thanks to all the panelists for a great program, and have a wonderful day. I hope you were inspired as I was by this program. Thank you for all the efforts that went into it, every one of you. Thank you. And for the great questions.
Very well.